I want to be clear about something before I tell you the rest of it. I am not a soldier. I have never been one. I am a senior maintenance technician on Orbital Station Vethier 9, which is a joint species transit hub and resupply depot sitting at the intersection, 3 shipping corridors about 4 light hours from the Vorath Alliance's outermost system. My clearance level is Blue 7, means I can go most places on the station as long as I have a tool in my hand. My job is to keep the seals from failing and the pressure differentials from killing everybody, and I have been doing it for 19 years without significant incident. I am telling you this because the people who write the official station reports left my name out of them entirely, and I would like the record to reflect what actually happened. Her name was Eravith Sohal. I am going to call her that first, because everyone else had already stopped. She came aboard Vethier 9 in the 3rd week of the cold season, which on a pressurized orbital platform means nothing except that the heating coils in the lower ring were running at capacity, and I had been down in Conduit Bay 14 for 11 hours with a compression wrench and a bad temper. I did not see her arrive. I heard about it the way I hear about most things on this station. At 0600, eating alone at the maintenance crew table, while the officers took their meal at the long table on the upper terrace and talked across each other in 3 languages. Somebody said a Vorath officer had come aboard under a military detainee clause. Somebody else said she had been a fleet commander. Third voice, which I did not bother to identify, said she had lost her ships and that the Alliance Tribunal had stripped her rank and that she was here until the political situation resolved itself, which could mean 3 weeks or 3 years. Nobody at the officers' table said anything at all. That was when I understood the shape of it. I did not meet her for another 4 days. I was working a pressure seal fault on the observation ring, a slow leak signature in the port window housing that I had been chasing for 2 weeks, and she was standing at the forward viewport when I came in with my diagnostic kit at 0530. The observation ring is not technically a restricted area. At that hour, no one uses it. It is a long curved corridor of reinforced transparite with a view of the transit lanes, and when the angle is right, the blue-white smear of the Vorath border nebula in the far distance. I had been in there alone enough mornings that I had stopped expecting company. She was tall, not remarkably so by Vorath standards from what I understood, tall enough that she had to angle her head slightly to see the transit lane directly ahead. Her hair was cut close, dark teal, the kind of color that looks almost black in low station lighting and picks up green at the edges when the corridor floods come on. Skin was a deep copper bronze. She had a scar on her left arm that started somewhere under the sleeve of her gray civilian tunic and emerged at the wrist. Not decorative, not the ritual markings I had seen on other Vorath officers, but the kind of scar that takes a long time to stop hurting. Eyes, when she turned to acknowledge my entrance, were a pale silver that caught the viewport light and held it. She did not leave. She stepped aside to give me access to the window, housing, and resumed looking at the transit lanes. Is exactly what I would have done in her position, and I respected it. I worked the seal fault for 30 minutes without speaking. She stood 3 meters away and did not speak either. When I packed my kit, I said, "Morning," and she said, "Morning," and that was everything. I came back the next day at 0530, and she was there again. I had 2 cups of coffee in my kit. I always bring 2 because the walk back to the maintenance bay from the observation ring is long and cold, and I tend to lose one to condensation before I get there. I held out the second one. She looked at it for a moment, the way someone looks at an unexpected thing they are deciding whether to trust. "Black," I said. "No sweetener. Station blend, which means it is bad but it is hot." She took it, she held it in both hands, the scarred one and the unscarred one, and went back to looking at the transit lanes. I drank mine and watched the shipping traffic move through the corridor below us, and did not say anything else. 4 mornings later, while I was logging the seal repair as complete, and she was on her 3rd cup of my coffee, she said, "You know who I am?" "Yes," I said. "The designation the station is using is detainee." "I know," I said. "I'm not going to use it." She turned from the viewport and looked at me directly for the first time. The silver eyes were not soft eyes. They were the eyes of someone who had given a very large number of orders in very difficult circumstances. and had thought carefully about all of them. They were the eyes of someone who had been looking at the same question from every angle for 6 months, and had not yet found an answer that satisfied her. "Commander," I said, "that's what I'll use if that suits you." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My name is Aravith Sohal." "Orin Cast," I said, "Senior Maintenance Tech. I'm the one who keeps the windows in." There was a pause that might have been something else in a different kind of story. In this one, it was just two people in an empty corridor at 0530 with bad coffee, acknowledging each other. "Thank you for the coffee," she said, and handed me back the cup, and left. "I want to tell you about Protocol Counselor Devansar, because he is a necessary part of the record, and because I would rather describe him accurately than uncharitably. He was the Vorath Alliance's liaison officer on Vether 9, a man of great administrative precision and genuine institutional loyalty, and his job was to manage the political complexity of having a disgraced Vorath fleet commander on a joint species station without creating an... I do not think he was a cruel person. I think he had a job, and he did it thoroughly, and the job required him to maintain a certain social catcher around Aravith Sohal, which was that no one of any significance engaged with her in any way that could be read as endorsing her position, past, or her continued presence. He came to find me in the maintenance bay, on what I believe was the 12th day of my observation ring routine. "You've been spending time with the Vorath detainee," he said. "I've been working the port ring seal fault," I said. "She happens to be in the same corridor. The fault was logged as resolved 10 days ago. There's a secondary signature I'm monitoring." He looked at me with the expression of a man who is aware he is being given a technically defensible answer and does not appreciate it. "The station's position on Commander Sohal," he said, and then he stopped and corrected himself with visible care. "On the Vorath detainee is one of respectful non-engagement." "I understand," I said. "I would ask you to observe that position." "I'll observe it," I said. I was back at the observation ring at 530 the next morning. I do not know if that makes me principled or difficult. Probably both. Here is the thing about working maintenance on a joint species station for 19 years. You learn very quickly that the political architecture is real and the people inside it are also real. And sometimes those two things run in different directions, and you have to decide which one you're actually responsible for. I was not a diplomat. I was the man who kept the windows in. And the woman standing at those windows every morning was not a detainee to me. She was a person having a very bad year, and I had an extra cup of coffee, and that seemed like the more relevant fact. We talked, over the following weeks, in the way that people talk when both of them are guarded, but neither of them is pretending. She did not tell me everything about what had happened. The engagement near the Vorath border, the ship she had lost, the tribunal afterward. I did not ask. What she told me was what she chose to tell me, which was mostly about the work she had done, the way the Vorath fleet organized itself, the logistical problems of resupply across deep transit corridors, the specific engineering flaw in a class of Alliance frigate that she had been reporting for years before the tribunal gave her anything more interesting to think about. She was an exceptionally precise thinker. She talked about systems the way I think about seal faults. Where is the leak? What is the pressure differential? What happens if you don't fix it? She did not talk to be heard. She talked because thinking aloud in the presence of someone who was actually listening was, I suspected, something she had not been able to do in months. I told her about my 19 years on Vether 9, the rhythms of a maintenance shift, the way a station sounds change when a pressure event is building, a particular harmonic in the hull plating that you learn to recognize the same way you learn to recognize a change in the weather if you grew up somewhere that had weather. Which of the 3 cafeteria lines serves the food that is technically edible, and which one will give you a day you'd rather forget? She listened with the complete, somewhat unnerving attention of someone who is used to briefings that matter. But she also laughed once at something I said about the Conduit Bay 14 compression wrench. And it was a real laugh, the kind that surprised her, and then surprised her again for having surprised her. Nobody else on the station called her commander. Officers used the detainee in official communications and nothing at all in personal ones. The maintenance crew had largely absorbed the officer's example, the way crews do, because a station's social structure has gravity, and it takes effort to move against it, and most people are conserving that effort for something else. I noticed that she ate alone at every meal, at a small table near the recycler alcove, and that the vorath cultural practice of midday silence, a formal meditative pause that I understood was significant, 19 minutes of unstructured quiet, that the vorath observe as a matter of course, was observed by no one else on the station because the common spaces were never quiet enough, and the Allied officers had not been briefed on it, or had been briefed, and decided it was not their concern. So she observed it alone in the corridor outside her quarters, standing very still with her hands at her sides, and I know this because I passed that corridor once at the wrong time and stopped and backed away, and said nothing and kept going. I started observing the midday silence at my workbench. 19 minutes, tools down, no comms. It was not a hardship. It was a thing a person could do. She noticed. She didn't say anything about it directly. What she said the morning after was, "Secondary seal signature. Is it still there?" "Yes," I said. She held her coffee and looked at the transit lanes. "You should probably keep monitoring it then." I think that was as close as either of us came to saying what was happening. Here is what I knew about her. After 6 weeks of observation ring mornings, she was a person of enormous disciplined capability who had been placed in a situation that used none of it. She was not broken by what had happened to her, the tribunal, the stripped rank, the social embargo. She was not bitter in any visible way, but she was being steadily, precisely diminished by the specific cruelty of being ignored. And I watched her get a little smaller each week in the way that capable people get smaller, when they are not allowed to do the thing they are built. The silver eyes stayed sharp. The posture stayed correct. She still stood at that viewport every morning, with the stance of someone responsible, corridor below. But she was not responsible for anything, and she knew it, and I think the knowing was the hardest part. I said her name, every morning, sometimes just in passing. "Morning, Commander," when I came in. "See you tomorrow, Commander," when I left. It is a small thing. I know that. It is a small thing. But on a station where no one used her name at all, I had the distinct impression that it mattered. The hull breach happened on the 43rd day. I want to be precise about this because the official incident report will not be. Precision matters. At 13:47 station time, a microfracture in the lower ring's outer hull, unrelated to the port window seal, the record, propagated along a pre-existing stress line in the hull plating and became a Class 2 breach event. This means structural alarms, automatic bulkhead lockdown in sections 14 through 19, and an immediate emergency evacuation of the lower ring. Approximately 60 personnel in the affected sections, mixed species, mixed ranks, including 7 civilians from the transit hub waiting area. I was in section 16 when the alarm went off. The evacuation protocol on Vethir 9 is a 3-stage procedure managed through the stations. Emergency coordination system, which requires a senior officer to input the Stage 2 unlock sequence within 4 minutes of alarm initiation, or the bulkheads seal permanently until a repair team can cycle them from outside. The senior officer responsible for lower ring emergency response was Commander Pethis San, a Vorath fleet officer seconded to Vethir 9 on a standard rotation. Commander San was, at the moment of the alarm, in the upper ring officer briefing room, which is on the other side of bulkhead, that sealed Avat automatically. He could not get through. The emergency station crackled. Someone in the corridor, a young Alliance logistics officer, I did not know her name, started the Stage 1 count and then stopped because she did not have the Stage 2 clearance code, and nobody in Section 16 did, and the 4-minute window was already running. Then Araveth Sohal walked through from Section 17. I do not know what had brought her to the lower ring that afternoon. I never asked. What I know is that she came through the connecting hatch between 17 and 16 at a pace that was not quite running and was not quite walking, but was both of those things done with absolute economy. And she went straight to the emergency station and input the Stage 2 sequence from memory. The bulkhead between 16 and 15 opened. She turned around. In that turning, something happened to the room. I have tried to describe this to people since, and I have not found words that satisfy me, so I will try again here. There were 16 people in Section 16 at that moment. None of them knew her. Some of them had absorbed the station's social architecture, at least at a distance. But she turned around, and she looked at the corridor, and she began to move people with the precise, unhurried authority of someone who has evacuated ships under fire and knows the difference between a panic that kills and an urgency that saves. And the room organized itself around her the way a room does when the person in it knows exactly what they are doing. 2 by 2 through the central hatch, she said. Children and non-ambulatory personnel first. You, she indicated the logistics officer who had frozen at the station. Count heads at the collection point. You, she indicated a large vorath enlisted tech. Take the forward position. Move. They moved. 16 people, and then more from adjacent sections. Because she had opened the Stage 2 bulkhead, and now the evacuation was flowing. She was at every choke point. She was never where you expected her to be, and always where she needed to be. She spoke in 3 languages without apparent effort. Vorath Standard, Station Common, and one that I did not recognize but that 2 of the civilians responded to immediately. She counted, she directed. She found in a sealed subsection 3 Vorath children whose escort had been cut off by the first bulkhead lockdown, and she brought them out herself with one of them under her left arm, the scarred arm, and she handed all 3 of them to a waiting tech without breaking stride. I was at the collection point by then, doing what I could, was primarily head counting and SEALSA verification. I watched her work the full evacuation from there. 58 minutes from first alarm to all clear. 0 casualties. 0 injuries beyond minor pressure adjustment symptoms. When the emergency coordinator's voice came over station comms confirming secure status, I heard a sound that I cannot quite characterize. Not applause, exactly, but something in the exhalation of 60 people that is its cousin. Aravith Sohal was standing in the center of the collection corridor. She had her arms at her sides. Her hair, so close-cut that nothing had come loose, was exactly as it had been when the alarm sounded. She had blood on her left sleeve, someone else's. From a minor laceration, she had wrapped with field tape between sections. She was breathing at a controlled rate. And she was looking at nothing in particular, with the silver eyes, in a way that I recognized from the observation ring mornings. The expression of a person who has just done the thing they are built for, and is now returning to the condition of not being allowed to do it. Protocol Counselor Sar was there within 7 minutes of the all clear. He moved through the collection point efficiently, organizing the formal incident response, and he stopped in front of Aravith Sohal and said something to her in low vorath that I could not hear, and she said something back to him and he moved on. He came to find me as I was signing off on the seal verification. Oren Cast, he said. Counselor, you were present in Section 16 at the time of the event. Yes. You will understand that the incident report will need to reflect the response protocol accurately. I understood what he was asking. He was asking, in his careful administrative way, whether I planned to say anything in the incident report that would require him to account for what Aravith Sohal had just done. I looked at him for a moment. Behind him, Aravith was speaking to the logistics officer, the one she had assigned to, count heads, and the officer was nodding with the particular expression of someone being given information they did not expect to need, and now cannot stop wanting. Counselor Sar, I said, I will fill out the incident report accurately and completely. He knew what I meant, was a precise man. He nodded once and walked away. The station council convened an emergency session at 1600. It was a joint session. Vorath Alliance representatives, the station's independent board, the Transit Authority safety officers. I was called to give a maintenance report on the hull breach itself, which took 8 minutes and was entirely about stress line propagation and inspection schedules. After I gave my report, I was asked to wait in the corridor. I waited 20 minutes. Then one of the council aides came to tell me they had additional questions. I went back in. The questions were about the evacuation response. Who had input the Stage 2 sequence? Who had managed the personnel flow? I answered them accurately and completely, as I had told Counselor Sar I would. At one point, the station director, a Vorath officer of considerable authority named Vorath Solon, Opinion I had never previously thought about, asked me to describe, in specific terms, the nature of the coordination I had observed during the evacuation. I said, Commander Sohal ran the evacuation from Stage 2 unlock through all clear. Her command was continuous and effective. In 58 minutes she moved 63 personnel through a Class 2 breach event, with no casualties and no injuries. There was a pause. She holds no current rank on this station, Counselor Sar said, and his voice was even. She held every room she walked into, I said, reporting what I saw. What you call it is your business. I do not say that to sound heroic. I am not a heroic person. I am a maintenance technician, and the thing I am best at is looking at what is actually in front of me and describing it accurately. What was in front of me was a woman who had commanded an evacuation with the precision and steadiness of someone who had earned that capability through years of real work, who had done so in a station that was doing its best to pretend she did not exist, and who had not asked for acknowledgement or consideration or any adjustment of the social architecture around her. She had simply done the thing because the thing needed doing. That was what I saw. That was what I said. The council session continued for another 90 minutes without me. 6 days later, Aravith Sohal came to find me in the maintenance bay. I was at my workbench with the compression wrench from Conduit Bay 14, had developed a new fault that I found professionally interesting. She walked in, and she stood across the bench from me, and for a moment neither of us said anything. She was wearing the same gray civilian tunic she had worn every day since arriving. She was carrying a folded document, physical paper, which on an orbital station means something formal and deliberate. The Alliance has issued a provisional reinstatement, she said. Conventional assignment to the vorath corridor resupply review. I leave on the 800 transit. I set down the wrench. That's good, I said. The incident report, she said. I wrote what happened. I know. She looked at the document in her hands, not opening it, not offering it. Protocol Counselor Sar told me what you said to the council. I said what I saw. You called me commander, in front of the full station council. That's what you are, I said. The silver eyes, in the maintenance bay lighting, did something that I have thought about since, and have not quite finished understanding. They did not soften. They were not soft eyes, but they carried something, a weight that had been in them since the first morning at the viewport, something adjacent to grief, something that a person accumulates when they have been invisible for a long time, and for a moment it shifted, not gone, but different, lighter, maybe, or more precisely located, the way a pressure differential is easier to manage when you know exactly where the leak is. I observed the midday silence, she said. I know for 19 minutes, every day, yes. She looked at the workbench, the wrench, the diagnostic tools laid out in the order I keep them. She was quiet for long enough that I thought she might leave without saying anything else, which would have been all right. It would have been enough. What was the secondary seal signature? She said. The one you were monitoring. There wasn't one, I said. After day 10, she looked up. I kept coming back, I said. She held the document a moment longer. Then she set it on the workbench. Slowly, deliberately, the way you set something down when you want it to stay. I could see the vorath seal at the top. The reinstatement order. She had brought it to show me, not to explain it, just to show me. I will be in the vorath corridor for at least 6 months, she said. Possibly longer depending on the review. Long assignment, I said. Corridor logistics are complex. 3 species, competing resupply contracts, no coherent inspection schedule. They need to understand systems. She paused. Where the leak is. Sounds like the right job, I said. Yes. She picked up the document. She held it at her side. Or in case, Commander, thank you for the coffee. I nodded. She nodded. She walked out of the maintenance bay at 0618 in the morning, and I listened to her footsteps go down the corridor toward the transit ring, and they were the footsteps of someone going somewhere that mattered. I picked up the compression wrench. The seal signature in Conduit Bay 14 was real, by the way. It had just taken me a while to find it. Here is what I want to say, for the record, since the official incident report will not say it. I did not do anything extraordinary. I brought an extra cup of coffee. I used a person's correct name. I showed up in the same corridor every morning and did not treat her as a political inconvenience or a cautionary example or an absence that the station had learned to navigate around. I treated her as what she was a person of considerable ability having a very bad year, and I think the considerable ability was always going to win in the end. All I did was not get in its way. The vorath cultural tradition has a word. I asked her about it once on one of the later mornings. She told me it is not precisely translatable, but that it refers to someone who holds the weight of a thing steady while the person carrying it gathers themselves, not a rescuer, not a champion. Something quieter than that. A hand on the line while the knot is reeded. She wrote it for me, the word, on the back of a maintenance work order that I had been using as scratch paper. I still have it. My vorath is poor enough that I cannot pronounce it correctly, but I know what it means. 19 years on Vethir 9 and I have never put in for a transfer. The windows need tending, the seals need watching. The observation ring at 0533 is the best view of the transit lanes on the whole station, and I have 2 cups of coffee in my kit every morning, which is a habit now, and I find I am not inclined to break it. The corridor is empty most days. I drink both cups. I watch the transit lanes. Sometimes, when the angle is right, I can see the blue-white smear of the Vorath border nebula in the far distance, and I think about the Velith corridor and a provisional reinstatement, and a woman with silver eyes who stood in a burning lower ring and did exactly she was built to do. I called her by her name. That was all. It turned out to be enough.